Are you a fan of pro wrestling, comedy, and combat sports? Then we have the podcast for you because we cover that. Are you a fan of pro wrestling, comedy, and combat sports? Then we have the podcast for you because we cover that and much, much more.
Do you like to debate with your friends? Do we have the perfect segment for you? It's the 531, where we take any given subject, break it down to a top 5. From there, we debate it down to 3, and then into that number 1 spot.
If you want to get a hold of us, find us on our social medias. Search Working Fans Podcast on any major social media platform. And if you want to find the podcast, search for us on any major podcast platform, as well as YouTube.
Working Fans Podcast. We put in the work so you don't have to.
Welcome back for a special interview on the Working Fans Podcast. Myself and the man called Dave, we have the opportunity to talk to the promoter, the owner of one of the biggest indies in the country. You can find them at Beyond Wrestling on Twitter, Beyond Wrestling on Instagram, the Beyond Wrestling Facebook page. And if you're looking for a website, beyondwrestlingonline.com, we are talking to Drew Cordeiro, or as he is also known, Denver, Colorado, the man, not the place. How are you doing today, Drew?
Dude, I'm pumped. We had a big show last night.
Yeah.
I was able to watch it. I got back from vacation, so I was able to watch it on IWTV this morning, and it was great. Was this the first show you guys were doing with the whole sponsorship program?
This is the first week that we introduced the wrestler sponsorship program, and it was a huge success. We had 15 wrestlers sponsored out of the approximately 30 that competed last night. And on top of that, we had the biggest turnout that we've ever had in Wrestling Open history, with 296 fans buying tickets at the door. So it was overwhelmingly positive experience last night.
That's amazing. Now, where did the wrestling sponsorship idea come from?
So the way that it works with Wrestling Open, this is very important, is typically, right, fans buy tickets, they go to a show. The part that the fans interact and see, that we try to the best of our ability to make just like a normal independent wrestling show. But infrastructurally, it's very different. The way that Wrestling Open is run, the way that it's different than Beyond Wrestling and pretty much any other wrestling organization out there, is the concept is based on an open mic night. So instead of me reaching out to the wrestlers to book them on the show, the wrestlers sign up to compete on the show. And from there, the Wrestling Open officials see a list of everybody that's available for the week, and they put the cards together week after week. Sometimes we have seminars, sometimes we have tryout matches, but the groups are private. Obviously, we vet who's going to be competing, whether it's a recommendation from somebody else on the roster or seeing a tryout in person or seeing some footage. But we know that it's professionally trained athletes that are going to be coming to compete. But as a result, with Uncharted Territory Season 3, which we did last year in Worcester, I noticed that certain wrestlers were getting paid a premium, and they weren't maybe as popular as some of the wrestlers that were just cutting their teeth, or they weren't promoting their appearances. And so Wrestling Open completely levels the playing field. Every single performer gets an equal cut of the gate. So if you're on the show, it doesn't matter what your level of experience is, how many matches you've had, everybody's participating. It's a team effort. Where the wrestler sponsorships come into play is that when an individual athlete gets sponsored, they get taken out of the pool essentially for the gate split. So not only does that wrestler get taken care of with a guarantee from the sponsor, but now there's more money to go around for the other performers that don't get sponsored. So yesterday was a rousing success. It's the most everybody's ever gotten paid for performing for Wrestling Open. And we had not only did we have a large crowd, we had a large roster to work with too. So given those circumstances, this is something we'll be doing every week.
Brilliant.
That's amazing to hear. And it's good to hear that the whole idea behind it is to take care of the talent. Because I think a lot of times in wrestling, the complaint you'll hear is about the pay and about how people don't necessarily feel it's fair. But here, it's set up in a way to be nothing but fair for everyone involved.
Sure, and like when the idea was first launched, like some people kind of took it out of context and said, "Oh, this is a way for Beyond Wrestling, to get away from paying talent." And the idea was not to not pay people. It's just with the idea of a guarantee. If one wrestler is commanding a $500, $1,000 fee plus a flight plus a hotel, you have a certain budget that you have to work with, and that's other money that can't go to other performers that may be there week in and week out. So the idea was to try and find wrestlers, especially in the early stages of their career, because we had people showing up every single week for free, not even to wrestle, just to set up the ring. And it's like, I can't put these guys and girls on uncharted territory because the expectations are different for a weekly super indie show. So let's come up with a new idea. And if everybody gets a cut of the gate, something's better than nothing. That was my thought process. But I never thought that the platform would take off where, we would have wrestlers like Wheeler Yuta or Mace Saruga passing through because they were in town for another, promotion, wanted to do a seminar, make some extra money. And, there's no special favors. Everybody still gets an equal cut of the gate, but they are passionate performers that then want to give back because they know what the Beyond Wrestling platform has done for them in the past. And since this is the new idea, they want to make sure that this platform is going to be viable for years to come so we can help the next generation of wrestlers.
And I really like what you just said, like it's an open mic night. And it's just funny, like you said, like with comedians, because in like those Laugh Factories and some of those famous comedy nightclubs, you would have all these people start up, but you have like a Dave Chappelle who walks in sometimes just to hone his craft. So like you have real you to just, okay, I'm going to stay sharp. I'm in the area. And, it really is. It's just like the open night.
So, the scene has changed, if you want to work, this is the circumstances, but people sign up to Beyond. So it's not like, oh, I tricked you. And then, it's a different set of circumstances. It's like, the deal. If you want to participate, you can. If not, there's going to be other people that are going to want to participate. And we've seen wrestlers like Alec Price, Ichiban, Dustin Waller, Kylon King, Ray Jazz. Ray Jazz. I got my Ray Jazz shirt on. Nice. Fancy Ryan Clancy, Becca Little Mean Kathleen, Teddy Goods. The list goes on and on of wrestlers that have raised their stock exponentially by participating. Bobby Orlando, Bryce Donovan, by participating with Wrestling Open since we started at the start of 2022.
Nice. Now, I started off with a different question than we usually hit him with. Dave, do you want to hit him with old reliable?
Oh, sure. The old generic. I think he probably any interview you've done. Were you always a fan? How did you break in? What was your fandom like? And what eventually got you to the business side?
No, this is a cool question. So I liked it growing up. And then I actually remember in 96, one night I was watching it with my parents and Jim. It was when they were kind of switching over to plant the seeds for the Attitude Era stuff. And I remember Jim Cornette saying some pretty negative things about Sonny. And I just remember being there with my parents and being like, I'm kind of embarrassed to watch this, being 11 years old. And I stopped watching for a while. I got really into hockey and video games. But when I went to high school, a lot of my friends were talking about wrestling. And I was so into hockey, believe it or not. I know this sounds so ridiculous, but one of my friends was like, well, who do you think would win in a fight? Steve Austin or Goldberg? And I knew Steve Austin because I like WWF. I thought when he said Goldberg, I thought he meant the referee from the Mighty Ducks. Why would those guys ever fight? And then it was like, no, Goldberg's a wrestler, WCW. And I was like, oh, this is wrestling I've never even heard of. So my buddies were really into all of the fringe activities that surround wrestling, like being on the message boards, doing the e-feds, doing the tape trading. And, they were like, wow, there's wrestling. It's on the indies. And I'm thinking to myself oh, I know they have wrestling in Japan. So of course they have wrestling in the West Indies, not knowing that it meant independent wrestling. I was clueless. But my buddies were really okay, let's do backyard wrestling. And then we started traveling from doing backyard wrestling. And, we went to the first Ring of Honor show in Massachusetts. And that was an eye-opening experience. I had went to college at Emerson College for a degree with integrated marketing communications, emphasis on special event promotion. So I had the education to lay the groundwork for wanting to promote wrestling events. But where it really all kicked off is I kind of parlayed that into an internship with Kaiju Big Battle. And with Kaiju Big Battle, they were trying to expand more into a wrestling audience. through that, I was kind of able to start working with Chikara. And at the same time, I was still kind of doing these backyard shows. And it was just weird. I kept coming across people that were professionally trained. Somebody like Jay Lethal was doing a backyard wrestling match. And it was just like, I don't understand. He's like a champion in Ring of Honor. Why would he want to go do this? And it's like, because when you go to Ring of Honor, like somebody's there telling you what to do. When you do backyard wrestling, you get to pick how you want to present yourself. You have the creative freedom. So I was like, okay, what if we take all professional wrestlers, we get a ring, we get a training facility, and what if we just do backyard wrestling, but everybody's trained? And that was kind of how Beyond Wrestling started. So that was in 2009. I had moved out to Ohio at the time with Ricky Shane Page. He was my roommate to kind of start Beyond Wrestling. We thought it was just going to be like a little side project to another promotion that was running shows out there at the time called Hybrid Wrestling. Kind of all stopped working together shortly thereafter. And it was 2 years before we started running our own live events. We did our first show in July of 2011 in Danbury, Connecticut. And even then, at the time, it was like, oh, well, you see companies like Dragon Gate USA and Ring of Honor and Chikara, and they're touring the country. So in my mind, it was like, well, that's what we need to do. And then when we saw the success of PWG just doing monthly shows out of one venue, then that's when things really took off. And we found our home in Providence for a couple of years. We did our first American Rana in July 2013, and it's been off to the races ever since.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see you guys grow throughout the years. Like I've collected the DVDs, and you can see, I believe it might have been one of the old Feud DVDs, Biff Busick, Eddie Edwards, or something like that. You can see like an old warehouse facility. And then you can see, I believe my buddy Scott told me about an American Rana you did at FET, where a guy jumped from the balcony into the ring, ruining the soundboard. And I'm like, I have to see this. And then getting to see you guys do a show at Electric Haze and then moving to where you are now with the White Eagle. I like that you guys really kind of, pick a spot and try and make that spot your home base and give it like a feeling.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, White Eagle has been incredible partners. And I mean, we're actually going to be launching a wrestling school with Ken Doan and Thomas Santel, who both competed for WWE. That's going to be coming the first week of January 2023. So now we're going to kind of be able to do something that nobody else in wrestling has, is we can start people at the Beyond Institute of Pro Wrestling is the name of the school, Bio Pro Wrestling. Start there. And then with Wrestling Open, being that it's an open mic night, we do a lot of shorter matches. So it's a great platform for newer wrestlers to be able to get experience in front of a live crowd. Again, because the expectations aren't, oh my God, this is going to, a PWG style show where, there's expectations of seeing 20, 25-minute matches. It's okay to do a 2 or 3 minute match and kind of figure out what works and what doesn't work. Like you said, the open mic night in comedy, you kind of work on your material in front of a live crowd. Then we're going to be doing the monthly Beyond Wrestling super shows. That's going to be a more high pressure environment. There's certainly going to be higher expectations in terms of the quality of the performances. And, there won't be as many performers. So that'll be a little bit more of a premium event. But then on top of that, we also are hand in hand with IWTV, which does international live distribution for independent wrestling, literally all around the globe. So then we look to our partner promotions. And at that point, there's only one place to go, and that's national TV. So it's awesome that we finally got this plan in place to be able to basically start to finish in terms of a wrestler's career before they get to TV.
Nice. Now you've talked about it a little already, but when you started, what was the vision / goal of Beyond, and how has that changed and kind of morphed as time's gone on?
Well, it was about the wrestlers first and foremost. It was making sure that the wrestlers felt what's the word that I want to say? Like a sense of ownership over what they were doing.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I think when we introduced fans and started selling tickets, it became about making sure that we were putting the fans first and foremost. And I think the pendulum kind of swung a little bit into the direction of, if we're making the fans happy, then maybe we're not keeping the wrestlers happy. And I think with Wrestling Open, we've really found that balance again, where it's when the wrestlers show up because they want to be there, what is it that they want to get out of their performance that is going to help them advance their career, but knowing that they also have to make sure that the fans are happy and that the fans feel like they're getting a good value, because at the end of the day, if the fans aren't there to support, you can't go anywhere with your career. So the two comes hand in hand, and it's tough finding the balance, especially trying to find the balance with not only the people that are buying tickets, but also the people that are watching online. Because there's, as we discovered last night, there were people all over the world watching from Japan since we had the Gato move tag team in. And whether they were watching for the first time, I mean, that opens opportunities for even their opponents, Brother Greatness, Anastasia Morningstar, just to be in the same ring with a Japanese wrestling stars. So again, when Beyond Wrestling first started, it was like, well, we were doing shows without even having fans ringside. The wrestlers were just wrestling for each other. We were taping it, putting it online. So it was, how do you want to present yourself so that if somebody sees this, you can get an opportunity as yourself? I'll give a great example. Somebody like Drew Gulak, who had a number of different personas and a number of different kind of storylines in different places, but it was always kind of a wink and a nod, presented as a humorous character. When he finally reinvented himself in Beyond Wrestling as the University City Stretcher, that's that technical style of wrestling that he made proficient, that basically set the trends for an entire decade. He was always capable of it, but he needed to be an ant, or he needed to be a politician. He was never able to be this technician in the ring. But when you come to Beyond Wrestling, it's like, hey, what do you want to do? And we're trying to get back that with Wrestling Open. Because again, as the Beyond shows and the audience got bigger, it was, hey, this is how we need to format the shows in order to satisfy the fans. And now, because the expectations have changed a little bit, because the format has changed, we can still put on a good show while allowing the wrestlers to present themselves the way that they want to. A lot of the guidelines and the restrictions have to do with stuff to better prepare them for future opportunities. So, for example, one of our rules is like no obscene gestures, right? Sometimes it gets broken, but if you make it to TV and you accidentally let an F-bomb slip, you're going to get fined. You're going to get suspended. You might even get fired. You might get, in trouble with the network. So those are the kind of things where it's like, okay, figure out how you want to present yourself, what it is that you want to do, but these are the restrictions. And I don't think that it takes away from the show. And I think if last night was any indication, we can really still give the freedom to the wrestlers while also making sure that the fans are getting a more than satisfactory, between the energy, between the engagement. I mean, there's nothing like being at the shows live. It's cool watching on IWTV. IWTV does a good job, but to be able to be there in person, feeling that energy, there's no way that you can leave without a big smile on your face, wanting to come back. That's how I feel.
Yeah, and
True.
we've been to some of the shows, like Dave, we've been to the Fans Bring the Weapons, New Year's Eve shows that have been out of control. And it's, like you said, it's one thing to watch it on there, but to be in the crowd, to hear how everybody reacts, to have to get out of the way of glass, barbed wire, like things like that. It's a Beyond show is an experience. And if you haven't been, you have to go. If you're in the New England area, there's no reason not to.
And the fans are the show, right? After the show was over last night, I thanked everybody for coming. But this is the reality. The more people that come, the more elevated the energy in the room is, the more risks that the wrestlers are willing to take to entertain, the better the show is. And then the better the show is, the more people are going to want to come. But it's like the chicken or the egg. You have to have the fans there first. Once the fans are there, that's when the show is going to get elevated. And it's kind of off to the races at that point. But if people aren't coming, you can only get so much. It's just that the energy is something you can't quantify, but you can feel it.
Drew, I think it's interesting. I just wanted to say this because it's business, but you're making it so simple in a lot of ways. Like, just keep everybody happy. Find a way. You get the fans happy. You get the people, the sponsorship. Everybody gets paid, so we all get a little bit something. But now their energy's up. They want to contribute more, and it's creating like this awesome work environment.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, and that's where it's an expert job between myself and the other people that put the program together. It's like, it's really, really difficult keeping everybody happy and trying to strike that proper balance, because everybody has their own ideas as far as what they want to do.
Right.
one of the best ways that I can put it is an individual show is like a book, and then each match is like a chapter. So imagine a scenario where each chapter has a separate author, because the wrestlers themselves are kind of working with their own material. But then somebody needs to take all of those chapters written by separate authors and then make sure that there's an overarching story for the entire book. That's the really big challenge on an independent level, because if we're the ones that just are saying, hey, this is what everybody has to do every match, then everybody becomes interchangeable. There's nobody special. There's no, when you have somebody like Bobby Orlando that comes through the curtain and he has his own custom theme song and he has this outrageous outfit and he's got his little stuff go and he seems a little off kilter and he's, calling people bish and saying, I'm your mom. It's just like me describing that, it makes it sound corny as hell. When you see him in person and you see the performance and it all comes together, I can't tell somebody, hey, you know what, you actual Bobby Orlando, this isn't working with you. You go do something different, and we're going to take Brother Greatness and we're going to give him the Bobby Orlando gimmick. Bobby Orlando is Bobby Orlando. Brother Greatness is Brother Greatness. The attributes that make them special are the attributes that they came up with, and so we want them to be able to be genuine to themselves. And so that's a super important component of it.
Now, you've had such great ideas through Beyond. You've done the weekly show. You've done, New Year's Eve shows aren't anything new, but Heavy Lies the Crown has set such a precedent. You've introduced Restival. Where do these great ideas come from? And are you nervous when kicking them off, like thinking they might not work?
Well,
because they've all seemed to hit.
Especially the Restival last year. The Restival last year was really tough because we kind of got hit with that third wave of COVID between like Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. So they don't always hit, you know what I mean? And that's one of the things that I try to be as transparent as possible with the fans so they understand where their support's going. If we had a ton of money that we were sitting on, it's not like, oh, okay, haha, we're scamming the fans out of sponsorships and we're all getting rich off of this. Again, that's why I try and be as transparent as possible. The Restival didn't do well last year. In fact, we actually kind of waived all of the expenses for all of our partner promotions because we wanted to make sure that, they would be down for the idea under different set of circumstances. Is it a possibility this year that there could be last minute restrictions? Maybe. It's not as likely as last year. Obviously, we want to keep everybody safe. That's the number one priority when running a show. If everybody's safe, then everybody has a chance to be happy. But all of these ideas always, it's never like, let's satisfy one thing. It's let's look at the entire list of boxes and what is the idea that's going to check off the most. So when we do something with Restival, it's like, well, the fans in Worcester have been great to us at White Eagle. We get to bring some promotions to the area that have never been here before. That's special for them. But then we also get to have, an American Rana-sized show with Heavy Lies the Crown. We get to do it at the end of the year, as we were mentioning before we went on air. One of the things that I've noticed over the years is that holidays are a great time to do wrestling shows. We do well with them. So now we get to bring a festival in conjunction with the end of the year when people have a lot of time off and, they've got a little bit of money coming in from the holidays. There's not that squeeze that there's other times of the year. We get to do a big streaming event for IWTV, which is again, none of this is possible without. So it's always a situation where it's not like, hey, wouldn't it be cool to just do this one thing? It's like, how can we accomplish these 10 different things with one idea? And that's kind of how the ideas come together. And that's really, again, going back to, the origin of Wrestling Open. I was looking at all the things that didn't work with Uncharted Territory Season 3 last year. And I said, how can we solve all of these problems? These are all of the tweaks that we made behind the scene. And I think that for the people that come to Wrestling Open, I don't think it feels that much different than Uncharted Territory. Maybe there's a few more matches. I think the match quality, absolutely. Like when you saw Wheeler Yuta versus Dustin Waller from last night, when you saw Best Bros versus Church of Greatness, the 8-man tag that kicked things off. There were some spectacular performances on the show. There might have been a little bit more matches and a couple shorter matches, but the energy stays up the whole time. So it's always, hey, what can we do to satisfy as many problems as possible? And those are kind of where the ideas come from.
Nice. Now, bringing up COVID, I know Dave Dave is fascinated with wrestling companies that ran during COVID, and he always has a question about it. So, Dave, what are your COVID questions?
Yeah, interesting. Like, I mean, we've had people we've interviewed on the show before too, where they're authors, right? Okay, so you're an author. Well, now you have a ton of time, and it can be really great. Almost like, yeah, it sucks that this horrible thing's happening, but you can turn a negative into a positive. But for you, I mean, you have to run a venue. You know, you're not getting like ticket sales or anything. Did you think about, you know, like, okay, do we want to quit, or, you know, did that thought ever cross your mind? Or B, okay, hell no. But, like, where does the creative process happen there? Do you just start thinking, okay, what can we do to get around this?
No, I'm a play it by the rules guy, man. I look, growing up, I used to get in trouble for everything. I didn't take a pencil to class, I'd be in detention. It's just my luck. I try and play by the rules. I think that when there's restrictions, if you can figure out how to make it work within them, then you'll be even more successful when restrictions get lifted. I'd said to some of my colleagues, I want to wait until a full month after somebody does the first show, because I want somebody else to kind of be the canary in the mine shaft to figure out what some of these problems are going to be. And we did a couple outdoor shows, and then we were going to do an indoor show as the weather got colder, and there was an uptick in COVID, and we had to cancel it, and it sucked. You know what I mean? Lost money on it. It was bad. Some of the silver linings, we saw good growth on our YouTube channel. We saw good growth with the number of IWTV subscribers during that period of time. But it was, you know, at the end of the day, wrestling is performances of you know, that you need to be there in person to be able to fully experience. We did a couple tapings. Like I said, that wasn't unfamiliar to us to do shows without fans. That was something that we did voluntarily back in 2009, 2010, 2011, before we started doing events where we were selling tickets for paying crowds. That wasn't unfamiliar to us. It was a little bit of a bummer to see some of the other promotions on TV resort to it and act like they came up with the idea, but that's just how wrestling is. So when it came to the pandemic, again, the number one priority was keeping everybody safe. We did the best we could with what we had, but I think the promotions that decided that nothing was going to stop them. And keep in mind, too, New England had stricter restrictions than almost any other part of the country besides probably California. You know, we're not going to go take a show to Indiana to do it for maybe 50 or 60 people. We just, to me, that's just not something that made sense from a business perspective. It made more sense to kind of wait it out. And for the promotions that found a way to continue to press forward, I think that they did actually grow by leaps and bounds during that period because there were so few options. It took us from our comeback show in April, pretty much all the way to August, to pick up any sort of steam, and it was going to culminate with our American Rana event in 2021, and then there was a hurricane that day. That was an even bigger setback than COVID, because it was like taking all this time and effort and energy and put all of our resources into kind of getting back to this one big show, and then everybody had to deal with the pandemic. Nobody else had to deal with a hurricane the day of their version of WrestleMania. That was a monumental setback. And I kind of feel like that was one of the reasons that we struggled with Uncharted Territory Season 3. And, you know, even still with the Beyond Wrestling Super Shows, I'm very happy with Wrestling Open as compared to Uncharted. The Beyond Wrestling Super Shows, I'm not as happy with as compared to where they were a few years ago. You know, when AEW and WWE are able to do events during the pandemic, well, their need for talent never changes. If I can't do, you know, we went from doing 40 shows a year to 4 shows in a year. I can't generate the same level of talent in even though it's over the same period of time, if we can't do the shows. So, you know, all of our best wrestlers are getting picked up, and it's like, who are we going to replace them with? You know, there's always that generational churn, but without us being able to do shows, it really put us far behind. Do I have any regrets about taking as much time off as we did? You know, you can't regret anything. You just have to figure out what you can control, and that's those decisions that you make going forward.
That seems like a good way to parlay into my next question, because I'm just interested, like, as a business person, like as somebody that pushes forward, how do you handle setbacks? Because you're going to encounter them no matter what. And when you're presented with a situation, how do you handle it personally?
I will always get in my own head first, right? I don't know if that's just human nature or just an attribute specific to me, where it's like, it's not, oh my God, this is the end of the world. It's just like, these are all the problems that we're facing. And if we don't figure out how to make changes, the reality could be this could all go away. And I feel like I look at it from a realistic perspective. And when I have to tell my colleagues and peers, like, hey, this is what we're faced with, sometimes it comes off as negative or being dramatic. And maybe it is. Maybe that's the way they perceive it. It's not my intention. But, you know, I'm a the sky is falling type person. Well, if I'm telling you the sky is falling, what decisions can we make to make sure that the sky doesn't fall? Maybe the sky was never going to fall, but if I believed it was, and we made the decisions to ensure that it definitely wasn't going to, I don't see anything wrong with that extra work, that extra level of preparation. So I will try and exhaust every single option. I know this sounds kind of crazy, but you know, outside of wrestling, I run a food truck business. I just found out 3 weeks ago that my food truck has irreparable damage. And so I'm kind of left with a decision where, do I keep my business going? Do I try and find another truck and see if I can find somebody that can build it out? Is it something that I can afford? You know, there's a lot of different things that I have to deal with. And it's kind of like, well, I don't want to sound doom and gloomy, but the reality of it is I can't drive my truck. And if I can't drive my truck, I can't operate my business. That's a tough pill to swallow. But then it's like you're left with all these different decisions. Do we pivot to a restaurant? Do we pivot to a ghost kitchen? Do we figure out a way to keep the truck stationary and do delivery only? You know, do we try and sell it? Can we go to another state and buy a truck? So just using that as an example, the same can be said and applied to wrestling, where there are always going to be setbacks. There's going to be, whether you lose a venue, it's always a loss of resources, right? You might lose venue, you might lose talent. Maybe a show bombed because you didn't sell enough tickets, weather-related stuff. I mean, we've had a lot of setbacks, but if you have the right people in the right places with the right partners that have faith, there's nothing that you can't achieve with hard work. And it sucks, right? Every time that there's a setback, I always look at it like, man, if this setback didn't happen, just think of where we would be. But you always kind of learn stuff from the setback too. And sometimes it's like picture like a level in an old video game, right? You get to a certain point and something kills you that you never encountered before. Well, you're going to get back to that point in the level, and from getting from point A to point B, because you've already done that part of the level, you can get there faster. And now you're going to encounter the thing that's going to kill you. You can be a little bit more cautious. Maybe it kills you again, but now you can get from A to B even quicker the next time. So to me, it sucks. It's a waste of time, but it's inevitable. It's a part of life.
Nice. Now, I've got a couple more questions. Dave, do you have any before I jump to my last couple here?
Yeah, just because this obviously is so much of your time, and then you have the food truck business too. What do you do to relax when you can? Is there anything Drew does just to like kind of chill?
Yeah, dude, I work. That's what I like doing. That's what makes me happy.
I get it.
I'm nuts when I'm not working, right? You guys are the working fans.
Yeah.
I love working. I like going to restaurants, although that experience isn't really the same since the pandemic. But like, I grew up in a family with great cooks. Like, I love home cooking, but I also like going to a place and just like being served and the conversation and the interactions that can come from it, and just trying different types of food items. I love looking at menus. I'm always fascinated by like how menus are put together, and or people come up with the combinations of food offerings and pricing that kind of stuff out. I watch a lot of I don't watch TV much, but when I do watch TV, it's usually the Food Network that's on all the time. I like watching cooking shows and stuff like that. I love driving around, but I love working, right? I like working more than anything.
My other business is I deliver Martin's potato bread out here. We have like a little side hustle. And like the business guy and me, I was thinking like, if he was in my area, I would probably be asking him like, what do you serve? Do you need any rolls? Just.
One of the best parts of Beyond shows, it's part the wrestling, but I'm not going to lie. The food that you guys serve is God, whether it's the Fruity Pebbles bars or anytime it's Denver, Colorado's mom's cooking, I'm like, what do we got over there? I'll take 2 of that, 1 of that. And can I get a dessert too, please? Did that help with that integration?
I think that it was something that made Beyond Wrestling special when there were places like, PWG and, like AAW, AIW, Wrestle Circus, Dreamwave, like that generation of indies. That was like one of those things. It was like, oh, there's home cooking at the show. Like, we got to try this. Then when I bought the food truck business from the previous owner in 2014, I definitely think that it helped us make the jump in terms of having an established customer base. Yeah.
Nice. Now, last couple questions I got for you. I love the commentary on Beyond Wrestling, and Dave and I do a little post-production commentary, and I've been starting to listen to commentary with a critical ear. As like an owner, what do you look for from commentary, both from yourself and your partner that you broadcast with?
It's really hard because for a long period of time, I was the one that would kind of put together the shows behind the scenes too, in terms of, like, I guess being head of creative or whatever. So to me, it was just easy to do commentary because I knew the stories to tell. Mm-hmm. And I don't like produce Wrestling Open. I handle more of the business aspect of it. And there's other people that kind of put the show together. So when I'm doing commentary, it's more from the perspective of a performer. And it's really difficult. It's like extremely difficult to be able to have to pick up on the story and then like perceive it and then accurately tell it. Like all while, talking and thinking at the same time. That's really, really tough. I love working with Paul Crockett. He's somebody that I hold in very, very high regard. He's a well-educated individual, and he's also very passionate. He just, I don't remember if I asked him or if he asked me about doing commentary once. And then he ended up, it was just like, when I was doing the Beyond shows, I would just get so busy with so many responsibilities. And sometimes we would do like the old PWG style with like rotating commentators, and the wrestlers come in and they would just kind of screw around and it would take away from the overall presentation. So it got to the point, it's like, we need dedicated commentators. And Paul was the guy to take the lead on that. And then when him and Sidney Bacabella got put together as a pairing, that was like Gorilla and Heenan. They were just perfect. They complemented each other so well. They're so different in real life. And it's funny. They just, it's almost like that natural animosity creates, excuse me. I did a lot of commentary last night, if you can't tell. That natural animosity creates like good chemistry. Mm-hmm. But then Bacabella, he manages now Channing Thomas. So when I can, I jump in the booth with Crockett, and it's a really, really, really tough job. I used to think like a few years ago, like, yeah, I'm great. I should be on TV, blah, blah, blah. But now that we do a show where it's like, okay, but you got to remember, like, you got to plug this, and then you got to, touch on this upcoming date. So then when you have to start remembering the stuff that you have to shill on top of like the narration of just telling the story and stuff like that, it's like a lot of things to juggle. It's a really, really tough job. So, for the promotions that have like an actual, honest to God, good commentary team, that is invaluable because we see how bad commentary can just ruin shows. It's one of those thankless jobs, like being a referee, like being a camera person, pretty much anybody that's not a wrestler. If you do your job, nobody's going to say anything about it, right? You're never going to get a compliment for it because you're at the foreground, but you're a background player because people are there to watch the wrestling. But if you do a bad job, people will be all over you.
1,000%. Is there
now also?
I think I
wanted to
delayed.
know what. Oh yeah, I'm definitely delayed. What advice have you gotten either in the business or in life that has served you the best? Would you say?
Wow, that's a big one. One of the guys that organizes the food truck event. So it's cool because me and him, his name's Eric Wiener. He does PVD food truck events. We bond because he knows that I organize events, and then he organizes events. So when I organize my events, I'm the event organizer when it comes to wrestling. But when he organizes his events for food trucks, because I run the food truck, it's almost like I'm the talent. So I get to see it from both perspectives, where he'll be like, hey, man, tweet out that we've got an event today. And I'll be like, nah, man, like, you already promoted it. Like, people are going to show up either way. And it's funny because, like, I'll be up, I'll be on top of the wrestlers like, hey, like, it takes 5 seconds. Why don't you do it? So I get it from both perspectives. To answer your question, the thing he said to me is, there's a difference between the way things should be and the way things are. And that's something that I think about a lot, especially coming out of the pandemic, where it seems like a lot of places have taken a step back in terms of quality. It's like, yo, we're like 3 years removed from like lockdown, 2.5 years at this point. Like, you got to get it together, and the places that don't are going to get replaced by the places that do. And I always think about that, the difference between the way things are and the way things should be. Because as much as I'm realistic, I always have that kind of idealistic approach where it's like, well, if the sky is falling, what can we do to make sure that it's not going to fall? But what can we do to like make sure that the sky's perfect going forward? And, sometimes you just have to be realistic. Like, this is the current situation. This is how it is. And as much as you want to work to improve it, maybe it's not going to improve. And then you have to pivot at that point. So.
Nice. Well, Drew,
very quickly, though, very quickly. Even the start of Beyond Wrestling, I had always. It sounds so corny, but I would always say to myself, the 4 E's is excitement equals exceeded expectations, and I think the number one way to be successful in business is to manage expectations, because if you can underpromise and overdeliver, you create value, not just perceived value. You create legitimate value, and when value exists, people are going to have that connection. They're going to want to spend money. So it's all about managing expectations. That's like the number one thing you do in any walk of life, right? Your buddy says, hey man, let's go to this party at 9:00. I'll give you a ride. He shows up at 10:30, might be your best friend, but you're going to be disappointed because you had the expectations that you were going to go. You might still have the best night of your entire life, but you expected something. So it's something as simple as that. Like, it's all about managing expectations.
Nice. Now, thank you for joining us today. We are honored to have this interview. Plug whatever you'd like on the way out, especially the wrestling school that you've got on the, horizon. Remember, they are at Beyond Wrestling on Twitter, Beyond Wrestling on Instagram, the Beyond Wrestling Facebook page, and Beyond Wrestling Online.
Okay, so we're going to be in Somerville, Massachusetts, which is a town over from Boston, the day after Survivor Series. We're going to be at Arts at the Armory for Beyond Wrestling Motherload. That is presented by Rock and Roll Fables. That's Willow Nightingale versus Masha Slamovich. We've got the Righteous coming in to wrestle the Shook Crew. We've got Alley Cat and Effie's going to wrestle Teddy Goods and Little Mean Kathleen. Got like a bonker 6-man tag match that we signed. Cruel, who's the new IWTV champion, is going to be coming in. Matt Tremont's going to be there. There's going to be a tag match to qualify to crown the first independent tag team champions. So, pretty big show. Alec Price is going to wrestle Ortiz from AEW. Becca's going to wrestle Akira. So, limited reserve tickets on sale at shopiwtv.com. Well, we love coming to Boston. It's been we haven't been there since March. And the venue is Arts at the Armory is like acoustically, like naturally, is like the sickest place to see a show. It just, the energy is just absolutely magnified in that room. We've got Restival at the end of the year, 9 shows in 3 days. All the information for tickets is at shopiwtv.com. But it's Pizza Party Pro Wrestling, Wrestling Open, ICW No Holds Barred, Blitzkrieg, the IWTV Special, Prestige Wrestling, Grind, Limitless, and then Heavy Lies the Crown. So 9 shows, 3 days, all at White Eagle in Worcester, Massachusetts. And then in January, right, first week of January, we're opening the wrestling school, the Bio Pro Wrestling School, the Beyond Institute of Pro Wrestling, with Ken Doan and Thomas Santel. Class is going to start that Tuesday, so email beyondwrestling@gmail.com for that info.
Nice. And what else do you have? I'm going to get in Jake rule. One extra question. What do you have planned for 2023 outside of the wrestling school that you can talk about?
I got nothing. It'll come together. I'm not worried about it.
Nice. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thursday forever. And I'm sure we'll line up our monthly dates after that. I'd really like to do a wrestling open show WrestleMania weekend in LA, because a lot of wrestlers like go out for the opportunity to work, but a lot of places already have their shows put together. So it's like, okay, well, here's a show for all the people that came out. I think that would be really cool, but it's not planned yet. No. I'm going to worry about the school first and kind of see what kind of relationships and networking we can do through that, and focus on Wrestling Open every Thursday. Schedule some dates for some super shows. I'd like to do American Run Up big this year. In 2019, we did it at Foxwoods, and
yes,
we did about 900 fans for that. So that was kind of a partnership sold show type deal. I'd like to be able to do it all internally and try and reach that same height.
Nice.
an
Well,
amazing
thank you
show.
for joining
Yeah.
us. Stay after for a minute when we're done because we just want to say thank you again. But we'll see you, fans. We'll see you again next week. Have a good